إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our first episode in the course on usool tafseer. And this is a course that is a little bit amorphous. It has a lot of overlap with, in particular, usool fiqh. And so I will try to tailor the treatment of the overlapping subjects in a way that will avoid repetition as much as possible. Some of the repetition that's unavoidable is in the definitions. The term usool tafseer is a idafa construction consisting of two words, usool and al-tafseer. And the word usool, which you're going to get again in usool fiqh and usool hadith, it's the plural of the word asl. And asl, it has a couple of connotations. Among the more important physical connotations are root. You can have the asl is the root and the far' is the branch. And you can also have an asl meaning a foundation or a base. So ما ينبني عليه غيره, that upon which other things are built, is an asl. And from that, then you get more abstract meanings such as rule or principle. And that's what we're talking about here. And then tafsir is the masdar of the form 2. As far as I know, the form 1 of fassara is not something that's at all commonly used. The form 2, fassara, means to explain, to clarify. Fassara yufassiru tafsira. And an example of its usage, of the use of the word tafsir in the Qur'an, Allah said, after my statement, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا يأتونك بمثل إلا جئناك بالحق وأحسن تفسيرا. And they bring you no similitude, but we bring you the truth and the best explanation. And a technical meaning of tafsir, or a technical definition of tafsir, is علم يبحث فيه عن القرآن الكريم من حيث دلالته على مراد الله تعالى بقدر الطاقة البشرية. A branch of knowledge in which the Noble Qur'an is investigated to understand to the best of human ability the intent of Allah, the Exalted, expressed therein. And the Western equivalent of tafsir is exegesis. I hope I pronounced it right. Exegesis. It's one of those two. Which means an explanation of a text, and it's most commonly used for the Bible. And you have a whole very intensively developed field of Western discourse analysis that takes a general approach toward any text, how to analyze texts. And Western discourse analysis has a very different focus from the traditional Islamic approach to textual explanation or explication. There are three possible sources that provide meaning or that would specify the meaning of a text. One is the speaker, the author of the text. One is the text itself, and one is the recipient of the text, the listener, the reader. And so there's been a big discussion, a debate amongst Western scholars as to who is supposed to be the provider of meaning. And obviously, it's there has to be some kind of interplay between the three. The Western scholars, some of them put the greatest emphasis on the author. Some of them say, well, once the text is out there, once it's been presented, then the text itself is the source of meaning without any great need to refer back to the author as to what did you exactly mean by this. And then there are some who say, well, the meaning is largely constructed by the listener based upon their background, their experiences, and what they bring to the text. And of course, the Islamic classical position has been that a law has an intent, an intended meaning from his speech, and that the goal of tafsir is to discover the intended meaning. Now, of course, we can't ask Allah, what did you mean? So the focus then becomes the text itself, and those tools which help us to understand the text, which are primarily cross-referencing within the text itself, the rules of the Arabic language, and of course any explanations that were offered by the Prophet ﷺ or those who had a special position of witnessing the revelation, in other words, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Those are the main bases for tafsir traditionally in the Islamic context. We have to acknowledge, however, that texts have a range of meaning usually. Those wordings which allow only one meaning, usually what happens is that when we're talking about that type of wording, which is called nas in usool fiqh, something which only allows one interpretation. When we look at the text, this is what's confusing in terminology, because the word for text is also nas. So nas has this general meaning of text, and it has a very much more specific meaning of that which only carries one meaning. So if we look at a text that has been declared to only have one meaning, usually that one meaning applies to a given word in the text. And so from a given angle, the text will have only one meaning, but when you take other words in the passage into consideration, then meanings open up, that the other words in the text may have a range of possible interpretations. So when you get to, on a case-by-case basis, how many texts as a whole only allow for one possible meaning, it becomes much smaller than you might think. Now, one of the things that's also that history is a witness to is that the Muslims have produced tafsir literature down through the centuries, generation after generation after generation. Muslim scholars have written tafsirs of the Qur'an, which indicates that everyone who approached the Qur'an found something in it that previous scholars had not found. Otherwise, there would be no point in anybody writing a tafsir after those early ones had been compiled. So, generation after generation, every generation has to come to terms with the Qur'an and relate it to their own experiences and make it relevant to themselves. And this is something also that every individual has to do on some level or another. If we don't have a relationship with the Qur'an, then our ideas and our worldview will be formed from other sources. And so it's important for every individual to read the Quran on a daily basis and not simply to learn how to decode those Arabic letters and to produce sounds. That's important, but to also be engaged in an ongoing attempt to understand the meaning of the message. So every individual has to do that in order to be a functioning Muslim. So that's one of the indications of the importance of this topic. Now, down through the ages, there have clearly been some wildly deviant tafsirs of the Qur'an. People who force the Qur'an to say what they want it to say, and who read outlandish meanings into its words. So clearly there are some manifestations of tafsir which are unacceptable, and therefore down through the ages scholars have developed a methodology that the majority would agree upon the broad outlines of this methodology. And so that's one of the goals of this course, that you understand that classical methodology. And being equipped with that, one is then in a position to evaluate how close a particular commentator is in their approach to explaining the meanings of the Qur'an. And we're living in an era of some massive revisionist scholarship where people are trying to say, well, the Qur'an has a timeless meaning, and it has, it was revealed also in a particular historical context, and for us to make it relevant in our time, we have to separate what is timeless from that which is contextual, and understand what it meant to the first generation, and then understand, derive from that universal principles, and then understand how we can apply it to our own circumstances. So, to what extent are those efforts and those approaches acceptable or unacceptable? Inshallah, we'll try to look at some of those things. So, usool al-tafsir would then be the principles that provide guidelines for the valid exegesis of the Qur'an. And the text that we've assigned for the course is Dr. Bilal Phillips' book, Usool al-Tafsir. Now, one could say that the title of that book could just as easily have been Uloom al-Qur'an, because there's quite a lot in there, which is background information that doesn't necessarily have a direct application to tafsir, but it's all background. It gives you the framework to approach this field. Now, if we look at that terminology, ulum al-Qur'an, that has become a separate field of Islamic sciences, and let's take a look at some of those meanings and the definitions. Again, ulum al-Qur'an is an idafa construction. Ulum is mudaf and al-Qur'an is mudaf ilayh. And ulum is the plural of ilm, which means knowledge. And there's so many definitions that have been given of knowledge. One is a firm belief based upon evidence that's in accord with reality. Now, this opens up huge kinds of philosophical questions. Well, how do you know that your beliefs are in accord with reality? And so, a firm belief would exclude that which is a wishy-washy belief. Based upon evidence would exclude that which is just a feeling, or that somebody told it to you, your parents told it to you, so that's what you believe. The part that's very difficult to make it verifiable or falsifiable is that part in accordance with reality. Zarqani, he talks about knowledge. One of his definitions, he says, a branch of knowledge, or one of his descriptions of it, says a branch of knowledge is information organized around a central theme, whether it is a single topic or a single objective. It's inclusive of tasawwurat. Tasawwurat is definitions, and the other thing that it includes is tasdiqat. And these are proposals capable of being proven or disproven. And it's inclusive of general principles as well as more detailed issues. So that's a definition for a field of knowledge. And al-Qur'an is the masdar, the verbal noun or the infinitive of the verb qara'a, yaqra'u, qira'atan, or qur'anan, to read or to recite. So Qur'an, therefore, actually means recitation. And a technical definition, we're not going to get into the aqidah issues about what's the exact nature of the speech of Allah. The topic is something better treated in aqidah. So for our purposes, we say the speech of Allah revealed to Muhammad ﷺ in Arabic and transmitted to us by tawatur, whose recitation is an act of worship. You could also say the book containing the speech of Allah revealed to Muhammad, etc., etc.